guys, so I'm going to talk about how things get in and out of our cells. So this happens all the time in all of our cells. Our cells need things to eat. They need carbohydrates, so they bring those in. They need building blocks for proteins and DNA and lipids, so all of that stuff has to come into the cell. And sometimes things need to leave the cell. So one type of way things can enter the cell is through passive transport. And it's called passive because it doesn't require any energy. So, somebody that's passive is just kind of like, whatever, not going to put up a fight. So passive transport, stuff just goes in and out naturally. So one example of this is random diffusion. And diffusion is the way things naturally spread out, going from higher concentrations to lower concentrations, right? Everything needs to spread out. Nobody wants to be cramped up, so things naturally spread up to take up any space that they have. And this can happen in a cell by small molecules that can go across the cell membrane all by themselves. So they can kind of dissolve into that lipid membrane and make their way through. And they can go in and out just randomly. Now, facilitated diffusion needs a little help from proteins. So there's lots of proteins in the cell membrane, and some of them are special channels that let specific molecules in, like aquaporins let water in and out. So these proteins let a specific molecule cross the cell membrane without using any energy. Those molecules are just going in, depending on the concentration. If there's more things concentrated outside of the cell, those things will tend to flow in. If there's more of a substance on the inside of the cell, it'll tend to go out so that things are spread out. And a specific example of this is osmosis. Osmosis is the diffusion of water through a selective membrane. And what that means is a selective membrane is something that lets water pass through, but maybe not other things like salt. So when water can go through a membrane and salt can't, it sets up a special circumstance where if there's more salt outside of the cell than inside, water is going to tend to go outside of the cell, kind of spread out that other salt. So osmosis is diffusion of water. So all of these are mechanisms of passive transport, which does not require energy. So active transport does require energy in the form of ATP, and it requires energy because it moves materials against a concentration difference. That means it's moving things from low concentration to high concentration, and that's not natural. So the cell has to use energy to be able to do that. And two different types of this are molecular transport, which uses protein pumps to pump a certain thing in or out of the cell. An example of that is like in your stomach cells are making acids to help break down your food. So they're pumping stomach acid into your stomach, but it's coming out of the cells, and it's using these protein pumps. They require ATP to move that acid out into a high concentration area. Bulk transport is moving large things or a large amount of things all at once. And this can be done through endocytosis. Endo means inside, cyto means cell, and then cis means process or something that happens. So endocytosis brings things inside the cell. Exocytosis takes things outside of the cell. Exo means outside. Like, have you heard of an exoskeleton? So that's a skeleton on the outside of a bug or something. So exo just means outside, so that's sending things outside of the cell. So we'll take a closer look at those. Here's a fun little animation that shows that molecular transport. These little green squares are more concentrated on the outside of the cell than they are on the inside. But the cell's using ATP to move them from a low concentration inside the cell to a high concentration outside of the cell. And it could also happen the other way. Maybe there's not very many outside the cell, and there's a lot of them inside the cell because this is something the cell really needs. It can also use energy to pump those things in. Here's an image of endocytosis. There's a bunch of these little things outside the cell. The cell membrane is recognizing them and bringing them in and kind of pinching them into this little membrane-bound vesicle that goes into the cell. Now this is how an amoeba eats. So here's a video of an amoeba eating 2 paramecium. These guys are all protists, single-celled eukaryotes. Here's one paramecium, here's the other one. This amoeba is just wrapping its cell membrane around them and bringing them in. It's going to digest them here in a second. Oh no, they just realized they're being eaten. And they're digested. So that's how an amoeba gets its lunch. Now here's a picture of exocytosis. So there's a vesicle that's a membrane-bound little pouch here. So there's lots of these little molecules inside of that little pouch. It fuses with the cell membrane here. And so all these little things get sent outside of the cell. And this happens when you're exercising and you start sweating. Your skin cells are secreting sweat. So this is going on whenever you get hot. And another example of this is in your neurons. So anytime your brain is sending a message to your feet to move, an electrical current is going down one neuron, and then all these little neurotransmitters, they're inside this cell. They go in a little vesicle that fuses with the cell membrane, and they get shipped out of the cell, and then they bind to the next neuron so that the electrical impulse can continue on down to your foot, telling it to move. So your last assignment for this unit is to build an infographic. And that's a picture like the one that I made here that uses both images and text to tell you about something. So you're going to need to create an infographic that tells me about different types of cell transportation. So you will need one example of passive transport, and then each of the 3 types of active transport. So molecular transport, endocytosis, and exocytosis. So you'll have 4 different things to put on your infographic. And there's lots of different websites that can help you make them, but the one that I used is canva.com. So if you go to that website and create your own profile, it's free. Then you can start creating an infographic, and I can help you find images and put them together to make a nice infographic to show me what you know about cell transport.